let's kick things off. So, welcome everyone. Very glad to see that so many of you could make it to today's webinar where we will be talking about nutrition and sleep. Just a few housekeeping items before we dive in. This webinar will be recorded and will be distributed to everyone after the webinar, so you'll receive the recording of this. And also we will have a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions during the webinar, just post them on the Q&A box in the bottom, and we will get to those at the end. Try to use the Q&A box and not the chat for the actual Q&A questions so that we can keep those separate and know how to get back to those. But also feel free to use the chat, comment and talk there. It's always nice to see people active on the chat. Today's presenter, we have Trish Jonker. She's a clinical therapist at Meru Health, coming from the Chicago area, and she's been a therapist for the past 16 years. And she's certified in integrative medicine for mental health. And today she will be sharing her wisdom with us. And just a note before we start, the disclaimer that this information is not intended to be a substitute for professional help. It's purely for educational purposes. So always consider seeking advice of your physician before starting any new treatments. All right, so with these words, I will hand it over to Trish. Enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much. It is wonderful to connect with you. As Mayu mentioned, I am one of the therapists with Meru Health and really enjoy my time connecting with you all as participants, both in the program and then also as a part of these graduate webinars. So today we are going to be talking about nutrition as well as sleep. And those are, specific carved out weeks that you've already gone through. But today we're going to be doing a little bit of review because I know it's been quite some time probably since you spent time through those weeks. And then also hopefully providing you with some additional information, kind of going one step a little bit further. If you've had any webinars with me before, you might know that I try to offer a lot of practical information. So you may want to grab a pen and paper or some type of device where you can take notes and maybe come up with some practical strategies or plans, things you might want to try next week at home to make some improvements either in your mood or kind of your overall functioning, concentration, sleep, things like that. And so we are going to start off talking about nutrition. Again, with those tips, around nutrition, I'm going to be throwing out a lot of ideas, and you physically can't do all of them. So again, as you're taking those notes, kind of be thinking for yourself, what's maybe one or two takeaways that you would have from today's webinar that you could actually implement into your life? What do you have the time, the finances, the motivation to kind of actually do? So let's set some realistic goals right from the start that we can't actually do all of them, but be taking some notes and then figure out maybe one or two things that you could do going forward. So we wanted to start off just with a quote, and this is a quote from Anne Wigmore. And Anne Wigmore says that the food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine, or it can be the slowest form of poison. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And what Meru really focuses on is that mind-body holistic strategy, and really looking at, as you're intaking nutrition, are you actually seeing it as a form of medicine, as a form of nutrient, giving your body the nutrients that it needs, giving your brain what it really needs to be its strongest? Or are you maybe less mindful about what you're putting into your body? And is it actually a form of poison where it's actually causing you to crash, causing you to be less productive, causing you to kind of fall a little bit off of who you really could be? So as we are going to start off, so the first challenge I have for you, and this is maybe one that might interest you for next week, is to have a challenge where you are going to engage in mindful eating. And if you remember the week 1 of the Meru program, we talked about mindful eating. This is kind of going even a step further, where you would take a whole week and maybe not make any changes to your life, but you would actually eat a little bit more mindfully. So paying attention to these questions I wrote down here for you, where over the course of a week, and you can be as formal with this as you want. So you could be taking notes in a journal. There's plenty of apps that would help you do this. Or it could just be kind of just a cognitive practice for you in your mind, where you're going to think through, what are you actually eating? Because for many of us, we go through the week and we think we eat vegetables, but then at the end of the week, if you actually were to write it all down, you might not have eaten a lot of vegetables. So really concentrating and taking some time and saying, what do I actually eat over the course of the week? It's like when you go to the grocery store, you buy those salads, and then at the end of the week, you end up throwing them in the garbage because they're all wilted. So what are you actually eating during the week, and noting that down? Another one is, where are you eating? So are you eating in a drive-through? Like, are you eating in your car? Are you eating at your desk? Or are you actually eating at a table surrounded by loved ones, where you are taking a bite, talking, laughing, taking a bite, sharing a story? Because actually where you eat can influence your digestive system. And what research has shown is that if you're doing the drive-through, eat in your car or eat at your desk in the middle of a meeting, as opposed to the slower paced sitting at a table, enjoying food in a relaxed atmosphere, it actually changes the way your body digests the food. So maybe taking note of where you eat. Another one might be, do you eat on the couch while you're watching TV? Where are you eating? Also, when are you eating? And this can be a journal practice for you as well, looking at your day. Are you maybe one of those people where you are so busy, go throughout the day, that you don't nourish your brain too much during the day? And then all of a sudden at night, you're starving. And so you eat whatever you can grab, and you're eating a lot more in the evenings. And so when are you actually eating? That could be incredibly helpful for you. So taking note of that, because what we really want is for you to be consistently throughout the week, throughout the day, nourishing your brain on a regular basis so that it has what it needs in order to do its job. And then, why are you eating? This is a great mindfulness practice, is when you sense that hunger, why are you eating? Are you eating because you're bored? Are you eating because you're sad or stressed and it's going to make you feel better? Or are you eating because your body is craving fruit and you're choosing to eat the fruit, for example? So just slowing down, being very grounded in the present moment, and being very aware of why you're making the food choices that you are. And again, when you're doing this for the first week, you may just do this as a practice and you might not make any changes, but you're just going to note for yourself these reasons. And then one of the most powerful questions to ask yourself is, how do you feel after you're done eating? And I'll tell you from personal experience, I did this practice. I had a season of my life where I was doing a lot of McDonald's drive-throughs, and you've probably been there as well, I'm assuming. And I was like, I feel terrible. About 10 or 15 minutes after I do this McDonald's drive-through, I feel terrible. I'm rushed. I'm eating in my car. It's making a mess in my car, and I actually feel bloated, and I have abdominal discomfort almost every time. And the more I recognized that and was very mindful about it and impressed that on my brain, I found that over time, when I thought about going to the McDonald's drive-through, I actually didn't want to do it as much, because I was like, oh no, because I know that 15 minutes late, those fries taste good, but 15 minutes later, I'm not going to feel great. And so I had made a conscious, mindful effort that paid off in the end, where I then was less likely to do the McDonald's drive-through. So actually paying attention, how do you feel after you're done eating? There may be foods that you regularly eat, but do they make you feel bloated? Do they make you have any kind of abdominal tension or discomfort? Like those things are not the way food's supposed to make you feel. So it might be that you want to make some substitutions so that your body feels good when you're done eating. Your body feels relaxed and nourished and stronger because of what you put into your body. That food was the safest and most powerful form of medicine and not a slow form of poison. So in the Meru app, as you remember from going through the program, we talked about the Mediterranean approach. And we do that because there's a lot of research that's been coming out that shows that this approach to nutrition is actually significant in reducing depression. And so as a reminder, this Mediterranean approach to eating focuses primarily on plant-based foods. So from those Mediterranean countries, when we look at them, we're seeing foods such as fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and nuts. And that red meat is really limited to no more than a few times a month. Again, we're not endorsing a complete, no meat diet. But red meat in particular is only maybe 3 times a month because it does have some great benefits for your body. But focusing more on other types of meats, and specifically, if you remember from the app, looking at half of your plate, about 50% of your daily intake would be plant-based foods. So again, with that approach, we are looking at plant-based foods, but also healthy fats. And you know that when you go to, for example, an Italian restaurant or something, they bring out the bread. They always, bring out the plate, and you can put the olive oil on the plate and you're dipping your bread in the olive oil. So there is a focus in Mediterranean countries on choosing healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil, as opposed to the American approach, which is much more on saturated fats like butter. And again, it's not that there's an elimination of butter, but we're just looking at moderation, and we're looking at what is emphasized and what is chosen more often. And so this may be a challenge for you, is maybe, do I need to switch up my fat intake? It's not that fats are bad. Fats are essential for your brain function, but we want to make sure we're choosing healthy fats like an extra virgin olive oil instead of always focusing on butters. Also, we find in Mediterranean countries that there is a reduction of their sodium intake, and they actually focus more on herbs and spices. And so again, maybe that's something you want to look at, is how much salt are you putting on your food? Again, here in the US, salt is one of the main things. We love our salty foods, our chips, we put it on everything. We're always adding a little bit more salt. Whereas we find that in Mediterranean countries, they use salt, but they also use a lot of herbs and spices. And so maybe that's something that you want to focus on. And then in terms of alcohol, what we find with the Mediterranean approach is they definitely enjoy wine on a regular basis. And there are some benefits to that, but it's not in excess. And so maybe taking a look at how you're doing with alcohol right now. And is that something that you're choosing to engage in excess? And is that leading to increased depression? We know that when we drink too much alcohol, it may help us relax in the moment. It may help us fall asleep a little bit easier, but we know that in the long run, it actually makes us more depressed. And so enjoying wine in moderation follows that Mediterranean approach. And then when it comes to sugar, if you remember from the app, we talked about how sugar leads to depression. And so we find in Mediterranean countries that they are selecting foods that are lower in sugar. So their desserts will actually have lower amounts of sugar, and then just smaller dessert servings. And this is kind of even in a lot of countries, they will have desserts with every meal, but it's always a smaller portion. Whereas in the US, especially if you go out to like a restaurant, you order the chocolate cake. I mean, that's a big piece of cake, right? And so we've kind of gotten into a place where we tend to have these larger desserts. If it's a holiday or if you go to a buffet, it's not even frowned upon to have a full plate full of desserts, right? Whereas in more of the Mediterranean approach, we're not eliminating desserts, but we're just having maybe 3 or 4 bites. It's just a smaller serving. And so that may be a challenge that you might be up for, because we know that when we're eating too much sugar, which can actually be really addicting as well, when we're eating too much sugar, we tend to be more depressed. And so is that sugar then a form of poison where it's actually causing us to feel more depressed, even though in the moment it makes you feel good for a little bit? Later on, it actually, for the next couple of days, is going to cause you to feel more depressed. So with this Mediterranean approach, there is a lot of research out there. You can Google it for yourself if you're interested, that shows that this fiber-rich approach of these primarily plant-based foods and other things in moderation can help relieve symptoms of depression. Another tip that I wanted to share with you all today is about L-tryptophan. And L-tryptophan is an amino acid. And many times we joke about Thanksgiving, right? That L-tryptophan is what makes us all fall asleep after Thanksgiving dinner. It's actually not true. It's probably the amount of food that you ate and maybe the sugar crash after having 2 pieces of pie. But L-tryptophan is an amino acid that is found in high protein foods. So foods like meats, cheeses, yogurts, eggs, and fish. And this amino acid is one of the main building blocks that your body uses to create serotonin. And so if you're a person who maybe is contemplating antidepressants, or maybe you're already taking antidepressants, you've heard this word serotonin, because with depression, we're always looking at building your serotonin levels and even using prescription medications to do so. But there is actually this amino acid that you can use holistically that can also help to build your serotonin levels. So making sure that you have some of these high protein foods in your daily diet can help with your serotonin creation in your brain. Now, another tip along with this one is that researchers have found that carbs boost this amino acid to the brain. So if you were to eat one of these high protein foods and you added a carb to it, it would help kind of fast track it to the brain, as opposed to just having a piece of cheese. If you combined that piece of cheese with a carb, it would actually help boost it to the brain. And then they've also found that fats help your brain to absorb any nutrients. So what they've discovered is that if you would combine these a protein, a high quality, really good protein with a carb and a fat as like a snack or a meal, you would actually really get a good amount of these acids and nutrients that would help build this serotonin in your brain. So again, when we're looking at food as medicine, I want to encourage you to consider, when you're making these choices of proteins, carbs, and fats, that you're choosing options that are healthy, that have high quality nutrients, possibly that are organic and not filled with other chemicals, so that you're really seeing your food as medicine and choosing to intake it so that it is powerful at really supporting your brain function. So a great snack or meal for your mood would be putting those 3 things together. And I've given you some ideas here today. So with protein, and you'll see even on some of these lists, there might be, for example, eggs are a high quality protein and they're also a healthy fat. So with a protein, you've got some options here. You would be having eggs. Almonds are a really great plant-based source of protein. Chicken or turkey breast, cottage cheese, a good Greek yogurt. Fish and shellfish are very common in Mediterranean countries and really good sources of protein and omega-3s. Your nut butters, quinoa, chickpeas, milk if you drink dairy milk, or if you like a nut milk, and then protein powders. And again, if you're going to choose to make a protein shake for yourself, I'd really encourage you to look at the ingredients and kind of look at the protein powder, not just get the cheapest one on the shelf. But if you're seeing your protein powder as medicine, getting a really good quality one for your protein shakes. And then with carbs, I've listed a few there that you might be familiar with. But again, we don't want to avoid carbs. We just want to have them in moderation. So things like quinoa, oats. Oats are really good for anxiety. Fruit, sweet potatoes, chickpeas again, and your whole grains. And then some healthy fats would be avocado, cheese. If you're like me, you're very excited to see dark chocolate on this list, but you're looking for the kind that's at least 70%. And then eggs, nuts, chia seeds, as we mentioned before, extra virgin olive oil, and then going for the full fat yogurt. got your protein powder, you can throw in some chia seeds or some yogurt, and you've got a really good protein shake. Another one is trail mix. You can make a nice healthy trail mix with some of these ideas and get yourself a snack. Things like a breakfast sandwich, a breakfast wrap, putting some eggs and cheese, some avocado, put that together. Sprinkling some stuff on your cottage cheese. You can see how you can, even with your own personality, maybe put together some of these combinations that would make for some really powerful snacks that would help naturally build that serotonin in your brain. So then talking about what we want to avoid, and again, with the standard American diet, we're looking at a lot of processed foods that we just don't see as much in the Mediterranean countries. So a processed food is any food that has been altered in some way during preparation. Now, it doesn't mean that all processed foods are bad and we should avoid all of them. But again, we want to maybe stick to them being some of the time foods, not necessarily the main foods of our diet. So what makes them less healthy? Often with processed foods in the United States, we've noticed there's more salt, more sugar, and more unhealthy fats that are added to the foods for flavor, texture, or to extend their shelf life, which is handy for some of us because we can leave it on the shelf and it doesn't wilt like the salad that we bought and had to throw out after a few days. But there's also a reason that it's not so great for us. So as you look at those kind of bullet points of processed foods, there's obviously a spectrum. Some granola bars are healthier than others. And we're not necessarily saying avoid all granola bars for the rest of your life. But again, really looking at, how much of these foods are you consuming on a weekly basis? That mindful eating that I talked about earlier, how much of your diet is processed foods and how much of your diet is based on foods that you could go out in nature and find, like an apple versus a frozen pizza. And can you make some quick substitutions? Is this an area where you're like, what, this is the thing that I want to write down is I want to maybe cut back on my processed foods and eat a little bit more whole foods, a little bit more plant-based foods in order to really help my mood, help my functioning. So that's kind of the list on the processed foods. And then, as we mentioned in the app, we focused quite a bit on sugar and how the amount of sugar that we're intaking can actually increase depression. And we're not saying never eat sugar, but we're saying that sugar should be a sometimes food, maybe in smaller servings, especially if you are struggling with depression, knowing that that could be maybe a form of poison where it's actually increasing your depression. It's making you feel worse. And so remember, if you were in the app and you did the nutrition labels exercise, kind of looking through your labels and maybe writing some of these words down, because could sugar be hiding in your foods as some of these words, glucose, fructose, maltodextrin. These are some chemicals, some ways that sugar is processed, that can actually really be increasing your depression. And so by reducing this, you can, in a very holistic way, actually help yourself to feel less depressed. So really want to challenge you and encourage you to try to do that. So moving on to sleep. So in terms of sleep, I like this Irish proverb because I believe it's very true that a good laugh and a long sleep are the best cures in the doctor's book. And I've made jokes sometimes that if I have a private practice as well, and if everybody in the world was getting a good long sleep every night, you'd probably put out of business half of the therapists, because really so much brain function happens while we're sleeping. That could be the best cure for your anxiety and depression, is just really getting you some good quality sleep, especially when you're going through a stressful situation or you've experienced a traumatic event. One of the best things that you can do is get a good sleep. It's the same thing, if you go have surgery, they want you to rest and sleep because that's when your body's going to heal. And if you've been through a stressful time in the last week or so, the best thing that you need is a really good 8 hours of sleep. So as I mentioned, adults need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night. And that would be straight, like not interrupted, not sleeping for 5 hours, but then catching up with a 2-hour nap. What you really need is that full 3 or 4 REM cycles of sleep each night where you're getting solid 7 to 8 hours. And the reason that we say that is because the number one thing is your brain function. there's a lot of healing and restoring and processing that happens while you're sleeping. And so if we don't get that amount of sleep, we tend to find that our memory is not as great, and that our concentration is not as great. Our overall cognitive functioning tends to drop a little bit. So I've heard people say, oh, I have so much work to do, I can't afford to go to sleep for 7 hours. And actually, the truth is, if you actually went and got a good 7 or 8 hours of sleep, you would be more productive the next day at work. You'd actually work faster. And so it kind of would maybe equal itself out, and you'd even have some other benefits as well. The other one is emotion regulation. And what we've seen is that when you are getting a really good night's sleep, you actually are feeling better emotionally. So anxiety and depression correlate with insomnia. We also know that your amygdala is more likely to overreact into those fight or flight responses when you're not getting a good night's sleep. So you're more likely to be irritable, you're more likely to be stressed out and sad. All of those things are happening when you're not getting those 7 to 8 hours a night of sleep. And then kind of what I already mentioned is that physical function where your muscles and your tissues actually repair themselves and heal while you're sleeping. And so we really need you to get that good night's sleep. If you've got any injuries or anything physically that needs to heal, you want your body to get a good night's sleep. And then also we know that your immune system tends to get strengthened. So if you're regularly getting those 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you're more likely to have a robust immune system. And then also weight maintenance. Insomnia has been tied to increased sensations of hunger. So you're more likely to just feel hungry on days when you haven't been sleeping well. And so getting that good time of sleep will actually help you to feel more of a regular balance of your hunger sensations the next day. So some of these strategies might be new for you. Some of them might be reviews, like I said, from the app, just to kind of get you back on track in terms of your quality of sleep. But the first one is to stay on a sleep schedule. And so we know, and we'll kind of go into this a little bit, but your body runs on different rhythms. And there is a circadian rhythm that naturally happens in your body that tells it when to wake up and when to fall asleep. Your body releases a chemical called cortisol, and cortisol comes out in the morning, and it kind of gives you that boost in the morning to get you going. You have a couple of waves of it throughout the day, and then it really drops off at night so that you can sleep. Same thing with melatonin. At that evening time, that melatonin gets released into your brain to help you fall asleep. It stays in your brain while you're sleeping, and then it drops off when the cortisol kicks in the morning. So there's these rhythms of your chemicals that are happening in your brain. And if you're on a schedule, you can kind of keep those rhythms in a nice, calm pattern. And so we want you to stay on a sleep schedule and get up at the same time every day, no matter what time you went to bed, in order to get you on a regulated schedule. Also, as much as possible, trying not to nap during the day. It's not that a nap is terrible, but if you're not on a regular sleep schedule, a nap will keep you messed up. And so if you're trying to work on a regular sleep schedule, I would encourage you to avoid napping so that your body starts to get into those regular rhythms, so that at whatever time, let's say 10 o'clock at night, you want to fall asleep. Your body starts to learn that's the rhythm and starts to fall asleep at 10 o'clock. And then your body starts to learn that you wake up, for example, at 6 o'clock, and then your body starts to wake up. And so those chemicals are going to be happening in a regular pattern. If you do need to make any significant shifts, I would say to do it keeping that 7 to 8 hour block and shifting the whole thing only by maybe about 15 minutes at a time. So for example, if you've been waking up at 9 a.m. and you want to wake up earlier, you would start with 8:45. You would do that for a few days. Then you would shift to 8:30, do that for a few days. So you're still keeping that 7 to 8 hour block, and you're just shifting it gradually so that those chemicals have time to respond and adapt. We talked about this again in the app, but it's taking a morning shower can be so good for getting your rhythm started. So we want, if you're doing morning showers and your goal is to get your cortisol going, get your circadian rhythms going, I would encourage you to take a morning shower shortly after you wake up. but take the dial and make it just slightly colder than you're comfortable, because that slightly colder will help you feel rejuvenated and will get you to be alert. Now, these aren't things that are going to work like right away. It's not like a Tylenol. But if you do this over the course of a month and you're taking these morning showers and some of the other strategies we're going to talk about, your body will start to adjust its rhythms and it'll start to recognize, oh, this is the time when we wake up. And your body will respond to the shower and start to naturally change. Another daytime strategy is movement. And so even 5 minutes of morning movement can, again, wake up your body and help it to feel alert. So you can kind of think through, it doesn't really honestly matter what kind of movement you do. If you're the kind of person that wants to be more active, you can do some jumping jacks. If you want to do some gentle yoga or stretching, there's some great 10-minute morning stretches on YouTube right now. During the pandemic, that was one thing that really exploded, was a lot of yoga teachers putting things on YouTube. So you can find something that in the morning, just do a good 5 or 10-minute stretching routine. If you want to take the dog for a walk, get out the door pretty quickly after waking up. Your dog will love it. And just go for a walk and move your body and get those chemicals into that healthy rhythm to wake you up in the morning. Again, these are daytime strategies so that you can get that really good quality of sleep at night. Also, fresh air and sunshine. It's kind of like in this thing your grandma might have said, is go out and get some fresh air and sunshine. But it's very true that when you go outside and the sun hits your face, so I would really encourage you, for example, if you're going to go for a walk in the morning, to not wear sunglasses, so that intentionally the sun is entering through your eyes and going straight into your brain and alerting your brain that this is time to wake up. Those types of natural holistic strategies will cause your body to wake up, get you set up in that new circadian rhythm, get that cortisol flowing, and help you have the energy for you to be productive during the day. And then again, set up that rhythm so that the melatonin will kick in at the right time. I mean, you might be taking a melatonin supplement because your melatonin isn't kicking in at the right time. One of the ways you can do that is by starting your day with some fresh air and sunshine, because then your body will go through the natural rhythms and your melatonin will release when you want it to. And then this is probably not big science. Most of us know that we probably need to reduce our caffeine, right? So even looking at how the food mood connection, the nutrition side of things, as well as the sleep side of things, if you're having a lot of caffeine, sugar, artificial sweeteners, you're basically stimulating your body, giving your body all this energy later in the day, you're not going to be able to fall asleep at night. So really, lunchtime is kind of that magic window where we need to kind of start shutting things down, or magic finish line, I should probably say. So in the morning, have your coffee, that's fine. If you want to have any little sweets or anything, it's actually better to have it earlier in the day. You'll be able to go through that process of digesting that food and having those stimulants kind of settle down so that they won't impact your ability to sleep. And so you might want to put that down as your challenge for next week, is to get back on track with some of those stimulants that might be damaging your sleep at night. And again, the whole reason we're doing this is so that they help with your anxiety, depression, burnout, and stress. Because if you can get that magical 7 to 8 hours a night, you're going to be much stronger the next day. And on the same thing with the stimulants, of course, alcohol and nicotine. Alcohol and nicotine, like I said earlier, they are great at helping us kind of settle down. They depress our mood a little bit. They take the edge off. However, they also impact our sleep, because again, that natural rhythm of our brain that I keep talking about is interrupted with alcohol and nicotine, especially in excess. So maybe this is a time just to be mindful, to take a look at your week and say, how much alcohol am I actually intaking? How much nicotine am I actually intaking? And what would happen if I reduced that? Would it actually help with my sleep? Could I get better quality sleep, which would improve my brain function in the long term? And then, of course, we always want to say, if your sleep is disrupted because of anxious thoughts, traumatic flashbacks, or depression, maybe make sure that you have already or are looking into the future of participating in therapy. Because sometimes these holistic strategies that I'm mentioning are not quite enough, and it is better for you to participate in an hour-long process session where you can actually really work through some of these things, and that would actually help your brain to settle down at nighttime. And then, many people through the Meru program pick this as their goal for sleep week, is reducing those late night heavy dinners. So often if you're got a busy day and you end up eating later in the evening, if you're eating too much food, you're giving your body a lot of work to do. And so when you have a late or heavy dinner, your muscles are digesting and metabolizing the food, and it's not going to know how to fall asleep when it's busy working. And so making sure that you have an appropriate amount of wind down time when you finish eating, your body's going to need time to wind down before it's going to be able to fall asleep. Otherwise, again, those rhythms are going to be confused. So if your work schedule is such that you have to eat later, I would encourage it to be a smaller meal. Maybe see if you can do some snacking throughout the late afternoon, maybe have a larger lunch. Maybe lunch is the main meal for you. But maybe this is the strategy that you need to work on this week, is reducing any heavy eating later in the evening that will cause your body to need to do a lot of work and be unable to rest. And then switching it to some nighttime strategies. A lot of people pick this one through the Meru program as their goal for the sleep week, is just to stop watching the clock, right? So moving the clock, turning the clock around, doing whatever you have to do to make sure that you don't look at the clock, get frustrated, toss and turn, look at the clock, get frustrated, but really stop watching the clock. So this is just a reminder of that tip as well, that maybe you want to continue that practice or start that practice if you didn't do it while you were in the program. We talk a bit about lower body temperature. And again, that's part of that circadian rhythm. And so what should naturally be happening in the evening is, as your cortisol levels drop, as your melatonin levels kick in, your body temperature should start to go down. And we actually need a lower body temperature in order to get a good night's sleep. And you've experienced this if you've ever tried to sleep when it was really hot and you're laying in bed, you're kicking the covers off. If maybe you're going through menopause and you're having a hot flash, it's impossible to sleep when your body is too hot. And so it might be that you want to take a look at the temperatures that you've got going on in your home, because about an hour before bed, you really want to start lowering your body temperature. So again, some people like an evening shower. Those hot showers can be very relaxing. But what I would say is to make sure that you're out of that shower an hour before bedtime. So if your bedtime is 10 o'clock, make sure you're out of the shower by 9 o'clock so that your body has that hour to start cooling down. Same thing with strenuous exercise. If you're a person who works out in the evening, make sure you're done working out and done showering. So all of that, that increased body temperature that happens from working out, make sure all of that is over before your wind down time starts. So you've got a good hour to let your body cool down before you're going to expect it to be able to fall asleep. Looking at kind of what you're wearing to bed. I think we talk about this in the app a little bit too. Like, what are you wearing to bed? What are your blankets like? Are you too hot? And do you need to make a change there? And then these are some recommended guidelines in terms of temperature. So if you are a household where you've got a combination of adults and children, kind of the ideal range is 65, 66, or 67 degrees. That's kind of where you want the temperature to be in order to get a good night's sleep. And at our house, we actually have it set up automatically, and it starts about an hour before we go to bed. The thermostat starts to drop and the house starts to cool down. So everybody starts to feel that the house is cooling. So in the summertime, up in Chicago, that can get a bit more expensive. In the wintertime, we actually save a bit of money. So it kind of works out in the end. But really making sure, and maybe this is a challenge that you want to do, is making sure our house is cool enough so that we're actually getting a really good restful night's sleep. And then thinking through your senses. So, we talk a lot in our sleep week in Meru about that wind down time. And maybe you don't know what to do during your wind down time, but I would encourage you to go through your 5 senses. So when you think about your sight, what does your house look like in that hour before bed? Dimming the lights can be a great way to just kind of relax your house. If you don't already have dimmer switches, maybe put some of those in. Maybe get a lamp where you can do, just the clicks to kind of dim the lighting, turning off some of the lights, making sure that the house starts to feel a little darker will actually encourage that melatonin production as a part of that circadian rhythm in your brain, because your brain, remember, in the morning, you want it to be bright, fresh air and sunshine. At nighttime, that hour before bed, we want it to start feeling darker and calmer so that your brain's like, oh yeah, now's the time we start to prepare for sleep. Because your brain can't go from busy working, bright lights, loud noises to sleep. There has to be a bit of that transition. So your brain's like, oh, here we go. And then your brain releases the melatonin for you naturally. Again, we all know turning off blue screens. Actually, it's great if you can turn off all screens, just really calming your brain. And then in terms of sound, quieting the house. So quieting any devices, maybe even turning volumes down. And then also people, if you happen to live in a house where people are loud, maybe encouraging everybody to bring the volume down a little bit at this time. If you're the person who likes noises, either during your calm down time, your wind down time, or while you sleep, using a fan, using some calming nature sounds or stories from an app. If you're not familiar with ASMR or binaural beats, you can Google those. There's a lot on YouTube for those, but they are kind of ways that you can use sound in order to help calm yourself. In terms of scent, diffusing calming oils, lighting a candle, applying some relaxing body lotion. This can be kind of a ritual that you're doing in that wind down time so that you really, lavender is kind of the classic, but not everybody loves it. But finding a scent that you find calming, and then in that hour before bed, that's when you're going to release that scent in your house, either by lighting a candle or applying some lotion, things like that. And then in terms of taste, what is something that's really calming for you if you need to have a snack or something? Again, if you're going to have a cup of tea, I would encourage it to be more on the warm side, or like an iced cup of tea. Again, if we're trying to bring your body temperature down, you don't want a really hot cup of tea, but some type of flavor that you find really enjoying and relaxing that you can build into a bit of a wind down ritual for yourself. And then again, like we say, really relaxing, creating an hour where you're going to wind down your body so that your brain can transition. It can't do it abruptly. It just can't. So figuring out some relaxing activities that don't involve screens. Reading is really common. Listening to relaxing books, listening to a podcast, something, crafting, anything for you that kind of helps you relax and settle down at the end of the day so that you can transition from being awake to being asleep. If you are someone who needs a bedtime snack, I would encourage you to eat, again, an hour before bedtime, and having something light, having something smaller. I will tell you that I'm a foster parent, and a lot of the kids who have lived with us have struggled with food insecurity issues. And so we've needed to do some bedtime snacks so that their bellies felt full and they were able to sleep. I know some people struggle with blood sugar issues and they need to have something that will sustain them through the night, because sometimes you can have interrupted sleep because your blood sugar is off. So for many people, having a bedtime snack is important. But again, like I mentioned before, you don't want to have something too heavy that's now going to cause your body to need to really work hard while you're supposed to be settling down. So again, having that an hour before bed, so your body has time to go through the process of metabolizing that and digesting it before you fall asleep. And then I put down here, again, going back to what we said with nutrition, combining the protein, the fat, and the carb. So that's a really good serotonin building food. Also something that will sustain your blood sugar and not cause any crashes during the night. So these are some options. There's some good protein shakes out there. I actually have one I've used with my kiddos that has chamomile in it, that can just kind of fill your belly and also help you relax at the same time. And then, through our Meru program, we love our mindfulness practices. And so if you do find yourself distracted by racing thoughts, if you're tossing and turning, if you're having some interrupted sleep, one of the best things to do is actually get up out of your bedroom, so that we're keeping the bedroom for sleep or sex. That's the only thing we're doing in the bedroom. So you're going to another room, find a cozy spot and engage in a mindfulness practice. Often when we're tossing or turning, it's because we've got thoughts of the past, we've got thoughts of the future, we're not grounded in the present moment. And so just starting that wind down routine over again, engaging in a mindfulness practice, getting us grounded in the present, helping us to remove those distracting thoughts, and then trying to go back to sleep again. So this is kind of the end of the formal part of our webinar today. I'm going to ask Mayu to kind of help moderate a bit of the Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can let her know and she can help me as we talk through these things a little bit more.
Thank you, Trish. This was extremely fascinating, and there are quite a few questions that we have
Okay.
received. First one, this is about nutrition. So yogurt seems really problematic. It's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be high protein, but seems impossible to find one without a ton of added sugar. Any
Mm-hmm.
recommendations?
Oh, like a brand recommendation? Um, I think really one of the best things to do is to take your time in your local grocery store because different grocery stores have different brands. What I will say is like the cheaper they are, usually the more chemicals and more sweeteners they have in them. So it does mean that you're probably going to need to spend a little bit more. But you are right. What I would say though is go for the full fat. Like I said before, that's definitely one where there's some really good healthy fat when you're eating a good quality yogurt. But you're going to have to spend a good 10 minutes and go through the labels and kind of look for ones that don't have those sugar words in the first couple of ingredients, which often in some of the more popular brands, you're going to find be problematic. I agree with you on that one.
Thank you. And a next one about nutrition as well. Is there any recommendations around milk for protein, full fat, skim, etc.?
Again, I'd probably go with looking at the ingredients, making sure that you're getting, I'd probably go with like a good organic milk. I personally, in my protein shakes, I really like to use oat milk. I have like an organic oat milk that I use. But what you'll notice is some of the more plant-based milks, they're adding a lot of sweeteners to them. And that's kind of defeating the purpose. So I would choose as much as possible to try to, again, look through those first couple of ingredients for those sugary words. And then in terms of fat, if you're doing an organic milk, the fat is good. So you can do like a good 2% milk is great. Again, in moderation. And if your body can tolerate dairy, that's fine. Not everybody can tolerate dairy. So that's one of those things where I would, first of all, probably go organic as much as possible. And again, finances, sometimes that's a challenge, but if you can. And then also just pay attention to how your body feels after having some dairy milk and see if your body digests it well. Just speaking personally, I've noticed that I can do dairy milk in moderation, but I've chosen to do oat milk in my daily protein shakes just to kind of bring my intake down a little bit, because when I get in too much excess of dairy, my body doesn't respond too well to it. And that's actually quite common for a lot of people. So maybe experiment with that, but really look at those sugar contents as well.
Right. And there was also really good comments here regarding the yogurt conversation from a few of our participants who said plain Greek yogurt is a great choice, and adding your own flavor slash fruit can help it
Yes.
a low sugar snack.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
And
And
I would add to that, like I said before, like if you can do the combination where you can get a really good, like not sweetened, plain, full fat, good quality yogurt, but you're craving a little bit of sweetness, absolutely. Like that's where you want to add in a really good carb, like a fruit. Pick your favorite fruit, put a couple of those things in it, and then sprinkle like some almonds in there or any kind of nuts that you prefer to give it maybe some crunch. And also a little bit of protein, those types of things so that you can get that good combination. And then also if you're craving that sweetness or crunch or any other textures, do it that way instead of going for the processed foods. Sorry.
yeah, no, that was an excellent addition. And also there's one more comment relating to skyr, which is like the Icelandic Very high in protein,
There's
low
your
in
Finnish
sugar.
accent coming out. That was perfect.
Did you notice it?
Very well done.
So I assume you have it in the supermarkets everywhere in the US as well. Um, but what I know is that that's also low in sugar. Are you
Mhm.
familiar with it, Trish? This came from one of our participants.
Am I familiar with it? I'm familiar with it, but I don't eat it regularly. So I'm not like, maybe you might eat it more than I do.
What I know, it's also a very excellent
Yes.
replacement for traditional yogurts. Great. Okay, moving on to sleep. How
Mhm.
late is too late to eat for digestion to not disrupt your sleep?
Um, well, first of all, I would say like everybody's different. So again, being really mindful and noticing, how long does your body need to digest certain foods? It also depends on how heavy. So I talked about having a light snack and giving yourself at least an hour to digest a light snack. If you're doing a heavy meal, I'd probably say closer to 2 hours. But again, it's not like it's magical. So I would just really be mindful with yourself and how you feel. Like just standing still for a moment and saying, does it feel like my body is still digesting this food? Am I still feeling heavy and full? Or has my body completely digested the food and do I feel a little bit emptier? It might take some practice, but that's really a mindfulness practice of kind of sensing how long your body takes to digest food and when it's done and when you can transition into sleep. Um, but my biggest answer would be it's going to be different for everybody. But my general rule would be you definitely don't want to be eating a heavy meal within a couple of hours of going to bed because it's going to make your sleep uncomfortable.
And do you have any recommendations if your cortisol is spiking too early and you're waking up in the middle
Mm,
of the night?
yes, yes. So there's a lot of reasons why your cortisol schedule might be off and you might be waking up too early. There are general shifts. So even with our ages, like, you know, 6 and 7-year-old kids tend to wake up earlier. And then when they're 15 and 16, they tend to wake up later. And then most of us find that we get into our 40s and 50s, we start to wake up earlier again. So there's a bit of age where your rhythms can kind of ebb and flow. Um, Trauma can also impact your cortisol levels and your waves there. So if you've experienced some trauma, that can do it. But in general, one of the like first strategies that I would say is to try to then adjust your schedules. So I would look at what time you're going to bed and then those daytime strategies of what you're doing during the day. So for example, and I would say, is it chronic or not? Like, I mean, we just had back to school. I've got a couple of kids here. It's been a bit of a stressful week. So I would say I've been waking up earlier because my cortisol is a little bit more heightened, but I know it's a temporary season because it's just this new transition to back to school. And I've got a lot of racing thoughts. But if it's more chronic, where it's more than a couple of days and it's not settling down or it's been going on for years, I would suggest that figuring out what, again, is your ideal wake up time and then counting back like 7 or 8 hours to what's your ideal bedtime and really start to get serious about those times. So even on the weekends, you're not really changing it too much. And then going through those strategies. So if you're waking up at 5, but you want to wake up at 6:30, I would say from 5 to 6:30, you would keep the room kind of dark. You would keep it kind of cool. You would not engage. You would not get on screens. You might read a little bit, engage in calming activities. And then at 6:30, when you want it to be your wake up time, that's when I would go outside, get fresh air, get some sunshine, take a shower, have move your body, let's do some exercises so that your body starts to see 6:30 as the wake up time. And then no napping, following through on all those daytime strategies, and then having your wind down time and a really strict bedtime, even though you might be exhausted because you were up since 5, really forcing your body to stay up until your bedtime And then over the course of a month of that kind of strict routine, seeing if it makes a difference to shift you so that you're starting to sleep a little bit later into the morning. Um, that would be my initial reaction, but that might be something you'd want to work through with a medical professional as well.
Thank you, Trish. We have time for one more question. This is also about sleep. Do you have any sleep strategies for people with young kids? We have a toddler that is a bad sleeper, that are not able to get the recommended 7 to 8 hours a night.
So you're saying strategies for the adults to get the 7 to 8 hours because the toddler is kind of all over the place.
Mhm.
So really, I mean, it goes back to helping the toddler sleep because you can't manage that. So with a toddler, you're kind of looking at, I think if I remember correctly, like at least like 12 to something hours of sleep per night. So I would be actually focusing a lot of my attention on using these daytime strategies with the toddler, and kind of getting the toddler on a really good sleep routine so that they can be sleeping through the night, because the same thing's happening for them. If they're not getting their recommended hours of sleep per night, they're more likely to be cranky, irritable, all those things kind of off base. They're not going to be, their brain function is not going to be learning skills as well during the day. So I would have a wind down routine. I would be, watching what they're eating. I would be doing all of those things to make sure they get their good night's sleep, so that you can then get back to your 7 or 8 hours. Because ideally, a toddler should be able to sleep through the night for a good significant amount of time. So something's off for them, and they just need you to kind of help support them through that sleep stuff. And I would say, like, as a foster parent, I totally get that. We've had a lot of really rough sleeps at our house with kiddos with anxiety. And so there might be some legitimate stuff happening there. And you might want to consult with a professional to figure out how to get the toddler onto a really good, you know, 12 to 14 hours of sleep a night.
Thank you, Trish. This was extremely interesting and important information the past 60 minutes that you have shared with us. And thank you all the participants for your questions and for participating in this August Meru Health Graduates webinar. Thank you again, and I hope to see you all next month.